Okay. Okay. Well, this is Marcy Seitzer, and I am so excited to talk with my friend, Rachel Dodge, for the Southern Christian Writer today. And so, Rachel and I had a fun time in Franklin doing our photo shoot and just kind of getting to see the town. And the fun thing for both of us is that we are both not from here. So, we kind of got to talk about, where we were from, and we're both from California. We're both transplants to Tennessee, and we've had to kind of adjust to a new life, new lifestyle. But we are putting down roots and both love books and we both love the Lord. So I think that was great. And Rachel had I didn't realize that I told John, I said, I think I'm one of the most uneducated of all my friends. So, because you taught at Sierra College
Yeah,
for how long?
I
So,
taught
I mean,
there 15, 16 years. Yeah.
so that you must have seen a lot of change even in in that amount of time, 15, 16,
Yeah.
with the kids even.
Oh, yeah. There was a big shift, but it became more, I just love college students. So as long as you just can go along with whatever they're into and kind of stay up with the times, you're good. Because as things
Okay.
became, it's like, I feel like tech caught up with the next generation's brains, if that makes sense. So once things were easily done online, they didn't have to have textbooks, any of that, they were so happy. It's like, here, just everything's online. You don't have to go buy anything. You don't have to carry anything physical. You could listen to an audiobook if you want. They were so happy. So it's
Mhm.
just, I had to go with the flow and I actually liked it too. So it was good. But I love college students and I love teaching writing. So I always had a lot of fun doing that at the community college level.
That's great. Did
Mhm.
you notice that they had a different appetite for reading than maybe what you saw in our generation?
Yeah, I would say more of them like to read than I probably would have thought. And so again, I always just wanted to know what they like reading. So I usually had a class or two where I would ask them to bring in their favorite things. It could be a magazine or a book or poetry or music lyrics, whatever it was, and just bring in what they love to read. And it was always really fun because they would get recommendations from each other and then I would read. I will never forget when the Twilight series became really popular and I was just like, what is this? Like, I think poo-pooed it for a while. And I realized all the girls in my class were reading it. And I finally said, okay, I'll read it. And they were so happy because they could stay after class and talk to me about it. And I think that honestly, I know some people probably have, varied thoughts on the Twilight series, but I realized when my students are excited about reading, that's the gateway. So if they find one series they like, then you can lead them to all sorts of other stuff. And so once I read it, they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you love it?" It's like, it was really interesting writing. It was really fun characters and really good twists. And so then we could talk about more books, which was fun. So that's my big thing. As a writer, as a teacher, as a mom, I just want people to find the books they love reading so that they'll do it more. I don't care if it's at grade level for my kids. I don't care if it's like it doesn't have to be classic literature, even though that's what I like. She's like, whatever will get people reading. And then, you can always nudge them towards some other stuff later.
Hmm. And when we were visiting, you talked about your dad. Both your parents were avid readers,
Hmm.
and the fact that you kind of grew up on. I mean, I know how it is for me. People think that because I'm from California, I lived next to the beach, and
Right.
it's like no, a lot of California is not next to the beach.
No.
We had
Yeah.
sheep growing up, and you had
Hmm.
animals too. So, what was
Oh,
your growing
yeah.
up years? And I thought it was interesting what you said. You and your brother had your own book club.
Oh, yes. So my mom would take us, we weren't really allowed to watch TV. So we were either outside, we had 5 acres and animals and all that. So especially over the summer, we were either outside or if it was too hot, we were inside reading. And so we would go to the library every other week with my mom and we'd get the max amount of books that the librarian would let us take. And then we would just set up all of our books in one of our rooms and just stay for a week or so, sometimes in each other's rooms or just for the afternoon. And just, yeah, it was our own little book club because the two of us would read together. Whatever, we had our own separate stacks of books. So we were just a silent reading club. It's like, we're a book club, but we're not reading the same books. Sometimes we had, like, he might be reading a book that I had read. We would recommend books, of course, but we mostly just were silent reading buddies, I guess.
But what a great memory for
Yeah.
growing up and stuff. Okay, our reading club is okay, we're gonna call this reading club to order. Like,
Mhm.
who's gonna take minutes?
Yeah, it kept us busy all afternoon in the summer, so
Well, and then, where you grew up was so hot too. So
Mhm.
I just think, sometimes when people think about reading and they think, it's sometimes it's a necessity. Like sometimes you just need to rest and slow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we had to stay outside and do chores until 11 a.m., and then it got hot enough that my mom would say, "It's time to come inside." So, it was either we didn't really watch much TV, and so once it was really hot, we would just yeah, we kept ourselves entertained with reading, and we'd have fans on us.
yeah. And then it was fun when you were mentioning the fact that your favorite books, you became the characters.
Yes. So I grew up reading I always say I just loved old-fashioned books. So I would go through the children's section, the middle grade, up to like I guess the teen books and stuff like that. I mean, I just read anything that was old. I wanted to read anything that wasn't current. I mean, I don't know why I've just always had a fascination with what I would call like olden days when I was growing up. So if I could find a girl who wore petticoats and helped on her father's river barge, I was all in. But if it was about like a detective, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, I just didn't, I don't know why. I just didn't like reading many modern books or, books that were coming out. So I just liked the old stuff. Maybe because I got all my books at the library too. So they were pretty old books. They didn't usually have like all the new releases, but so I loved Anna Green Gables, Little House on the Prairie, all the Louisa May Alcott books, and just like I said, any other book I could find that was about any old-fashioned girl. And so I I always was dressed up. My mom had all these dress up clothes she would gather from rummage sales and different places, and so I would pretend I was those characters and then kind of continue the story. So I was always acting it out, and of course, my brother had to he was younger, so I kind of forced him into being all of my auxiliary characters. My dad he'd see us in and out, and he said one time he heard my brother stomping in after me, and he has boots on and a cowboy hat and a little leather vest, and I was dressed with a bonnet, and little pigtails and stuff, and he said my brother was like, "I'm tired of being Pa." Like, because we were always playing I was Laura and he was Pa. Yeah, so I just kinda grew up I always say I grew up in a world of books. Like, I just literally lived in them kind of in my mind, and then our house was just filled with everywhere I went, there was books. Every room had lots of books and bookshelves.
Mhm. And, it was kind of fun because when we met, we had just watched Pride and Prejudice. We did watch Sense and Sensibility that the next
Ooh.
day. So, I mean, we are like just diving in Jane Austen all the way here. We watched 2 back-to-back ones.
Yay.
And, you were like, "You're never too old to have an obsession."
It's true. Oh my goodness, yeah. I started reading those books maybe junior high, but my dad was the one who was Jane Austen obsessed, and so we started watching all the movies when I was in high school, and we would watch the long 6-hour version of Pride and Prejudice. We watched the videotapes so many times we wore them out, and then finally the DVDs came out, and we got that, and I think at some point those started to die. I mean, we would watch it over and over and over again. So that was kind of I would say I had all these younger girl books, and then once I got into high school, it was all of those Jane Austen, and I loved reading Charlotte Bronte, and I was kind of in the same world, I guess, the same genre, but just a little bit grown up.
Mhm. And then when you started writing, what did you think you were gonna be writing?
So I never really planned to publish or write any books. I loved writing articles and I had done like journalism in college and public relations. So I was always writing like website copy, like all that type of stuff. I never thought of doing like an actual book, but I had an idea for a children's book. And so I went to a Christian writers conference and I was trying to figure out how to get that published. And while I was there, I ended up talking to one of my writing mentors, and she kept saying, "Why aren't you doing something with Jane Austen?" Because I did my master's thesis on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and I wrote about etiquette. And after that, I kind of ended up sort of being on like this speaking I got all these speaking gigs all about Jane Austen and her Regency era, how they dressed, what they wore, what they did, how they drank tea, all that. So I did And people that watch all the Jane Austen movies, they of course everybody wants to know, like, why do they do things the way they do them, and what were the rules of etiquette? And so I would look at the movies and books and explain that. And so I started speaking a lot about Jane Austen, and I was writing for Jane Austen's World blog. And so this writing mentor said, why don't you write a book about Jane Austen? I mean, your children's book's really beautiful, but you kind of have a built-in platform, and you have so much to share about Jane Austen. And I really didn't feel like I there was a book to write, because I felt like they've all been written before. But when we were chatting at that Christian Writers Conference, I said, "Well, I've always thought it'd be neat to do something with her prayers." And Jane Austen wrote 3 beautiful prayers, and no one had ever really done much with them. Most people don't even know they exist. And so, as soon as I said that, she and I both just said, wow, that it just feels like such a God moment when it just came out of my mouth. And she just said, you need to pray about that. And so I ended up working on writing like a devotional book based on Jane Austen's prayers. And that was my first book. And that's when the Lord took me from just this love of classics and all the books I grew up with, and finally getting to join that with my faith, which I had longed to write about for a long time, but I just didn't know how that would come together. And I never thought it would be in book form. I thought it was more, I tried blogging, and, I would do all that stuff, and I would submit articles to different like Christian, online magazines and things like that. But writing a devotional book, I had never thought of. And as soon as I started putting it together, it just felt like that was the writing I'd always trying to do or look for. My brain kind of thinks in devotional content.
Mhm.
Like, I read all my favorite classics, I always see a little passage and I'll think, "Oh my gosh, that's such a great lesson about how God is in our lives," and I see it all in kind of symbols.
Mhm.
So putting together, like, Praying with Jane was my first book, and that's the one that's written on her. It was like a beautiful partnership.
Well, and one of the things that you had said was you were thinking you would have to put away, like those were from your childhood, but
Yeah.
how the Lord just
Green Gables, Little Women, Secret Garden, I would read them. I'm one of those people, I have read some of those books more times than I could ever count, because I'm kind of a seasonal mood reader. So if it's fall, there's certain books I want to read. And so I would just reread all of these books. And then as I grew up, I don't know. I don't know if other people fall into this trap too, but I felt like those were kind of childish things. And so then once I was going to grad school and stuff, I mean, no, that wasn't a thing. If I said, "Oh, I want to write my master's thesis on, I don't know, Anne of Green Gables," it was kind of, people would just chuckle. It's like, okay, you need actual, like, a literature, and I was like, gosh, and I really did at that point. I was so crazy about all the Jane Austen stuff, and it made sense that that was my first devotional book that I had published. But I felt like when I started to after that, I wrote an Anna Green Gables devotional, and then it led to a Little Women devotional and a Secret Garden devotional. And that's where I felt like God took all of those years from when I was growing up, all the things that I just loved. I loved living in that world. I would dress up and try to pretend like I lived in the secret garden. And I couldn't believe my good fortune that the Lord was allowing me to take something I had always been passionate about and now write devotional books based on those books, because when I was writing them, it felt like I was in that world again. It's like,
Mhm.
as a child, you can slip into that world. And then as I got older, I remember there were times where I'm like, I just can't pretend anymore. It's like I can't be Anne anymore. You can't really slip into that world as you get older. And then when I'm writing the devotional books, I mean, it's just, months and months of just getting to live in that world. But
Mhm.
the Lord started to show me the so much depth. I mean, I read them as a child just for fun, right? And they were feel good books. But when you reread the classics as an adult, you see so much. There's so much that's so beautiful. And there's always themes of redemption and biblical themes throughout every classic book. I think any story has something. There's
Mhm.
something there that points back to, like, the threads that run through the Bible. And I mean, I love God's word and I love classic books. Getting to write those devotional books felt like the almost like the Lord found my niche for me, like the thing that I
Mhm.
wouldn't have. Like I said, it's the dream I never even thought of dreaming. It's getting
Mhm.
to write. Because I always thought, well, maybe I should write Bible studies, or maybe I should write more blogs for Christian women's magazines or for churches. And then once I got to write these devotional books, I mean, people will ask me all the time, how'd you come up with it? I don't think I did. It feels like like God did, you know what I mean? It's like when I would tell people my first book, the Jane Austen based on Jane Austen's prayers, and I would tell people, "I'm gonna write a devotional based on Jane Austen's prayers, and I just got a contract," and they would say, "Of course you did. That's perfect for you. Why didn't we think of that before?" I'm like, "I don't know. It never occurred." But I remember there was a long period of time, and I hope this would encourage some of the people that, might listen to this or read the magazine, that there was a long period of time I felt like was like this preparation. I would say almost a decade of time where I was still teaching part-time and I was raising my kids, and I had this longing that I couldn't put my finger on. I kept feeling like I was supposed to use my writing for something, and I helped edit like church websites, I helped with women's Bible studies. I did all the things I knew I could do that were just, available to me with like writing and editing for people and ministries, and I would help with website content and stuff, but I just felt like there was something I wasn't doing yet that God had called me to do. I don't know how else to
Mhm.
explain it. I would tell my husband, it's like it's right beyond my, it's like I'm almost there, and I'd try things. I started a few different blogs over the years and thinking, "Oh, this is it. This is it." And it seemed like it was more just like God's timing, because when
Mhm.
it did happen, I wasn't looking for it. My kids were old enough to be in school some of the time, and I had thought, "Oh, I'm gonna get more involved with women's ministry that I'd been involved in." And it was actually during that time the Lord told me to step back, and I had no idea why. I'm going, "Okay, my kids are actually going to like preschool a few mornings a week. I could get more involved at church. I could volunteer.
Mhm.
I could teach more." Like I thought I'd be out of the house more, and the Lord actually called me to a quieter season. It was very, like, difficult at first because I didn't know why. I was like, "Why are you emptying my schedule and not giving me something to do?" It was very uncomfortable. And then looking back now, though, I realized he was saying, "I need you to step back from all of those things 'cause I'm gonna open the doors to something new, and I need you to be, 1, prepared, spend some time with me." I would go on these walks, and I know he kept saying, "I'm
Mhm.
jealous for you. I want time with just you. You've been pouring into kids," and all the things that have happened over that decade of grandparents passing away, all those things that you don't even get time to really process. So I
Mhm.
was processing all of that with the Lord, and I will never forget there was a day I was cooking and there's chaos all around. We have like worship music on and I'm trying to cook. And I just remember thinking I was stepping back from women's ministry and all the stuff I'd been doing, and I was like, "Should I be teaching more?" I could take a few more classes now, and I felt like the Lord was saying, like, "Don't add." And I think the schedule didn't work out where I could have anyway. I'm like, "God, what are you doing?" I feel like almost like the train is leaving the station, women's Bible studies, everything's getting started. It was like the new year. My kids are gonna be in preschool, and I'm just gonna be at home. Like, it felt like I had this picture of, like, the train leaving a station. I was stuck on the platform, like, but it's leaving, like,
Yeah.
and I really in that moment felt like the Lord told me to let it to I had to let that train, just let it go, and then I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do next. I had no clue what that was, but I had this settled sense of like, he's getting ready to do something. I still felt like I didn't really know what it was. And then my brother actually invited me to a writers conference, and he said, "I know you love to write. Let's just go together. Let's go as buddies." I was like, "Okay, okay." I'll go just because I love my brother and I wanted to hang out with him. And so I went to LA for a writers conference, and I had my little children's book that I'd written and met some people there. But a couple people when I was there, when they would read my book, they're like, "That's Christian writing. Maybe you should try a Christian writers conference." And they told me about the Mount Hermon Christian Writers Conference. And I was like, "Gosh, I don't know. I'm not really thinking about actually writing like books and putting a ton of
Mhm.
money into like writers
Yeah.
conferences." Oh my gosh. I mean, I've gone to many now, but that first conference was just life changing because it was there that, like I said, I had some divine appointments about doing something with Jane Austen's prayers. And then I went to an art of devotional writing or the craft of devotional writing workshop one afternoon. It felt like I'm here to do children's. I've been going to children's workshops. And I felt like the Lord was like, "Go to devotional writing." Okay. That's kind of cool. I like devotional books. And I went to that when I went to that class, and I sat there, and the teacher she was so good. I'm still in touch with her now. It was like she taught it so well and just gave the basics of how to write devotions.
Mm.
And She was an editor, and she just at the end gave us like maybe 5 minutes to write a sample devotional. And so I wrote it out. I based it on like a missionary story I'd read because I love reading missionary stories and books. And so I just wrote it out, and you put like, a verse at the top, and I just had a verse in my head. I wrote it down, and then I had a little quote from the book as best as I could remember it. And then I wrote this little devotional based on that missionary story. And then she asked us to read them out loud and stuff. But I remember that just it like flowed out of me so fast in that 5 minutes. I mean, I wrote like a whole devotion in 5 minutes, which doesn't always happen, obviously,
Yeah.
but I wish. But I remember leaving that class and I was like, I think I just finally found what I'm supposed to be doing because it felt like this something in me finally was like finding its spot or something. It was like, maybe I'm supposed to write devotions. And so then I got home with this, Jane Austen's prayer idea and this I love this craft of devotions. And once I sat down and I looked at Jane Austen's prayers and I realized there was about 30 lines and I just thought, what if I did a one per day? And I remember I was sitting on the floor of my office with all my books of Jane Austen books and my laptop and scraps of paper I'd been writing on. And I just went, oh my gosh, what if it's like a 31-day devotional, like a month-long devotional based on our prayers?
Mm.
And so that's where that was birthed, and I just feel like from there on, it was like the Lord just kept saying, "I wanna take all the things you've always loved and thought were just hobbies and just kind of fun things you do, and actually redeem them. And I want you to show that my story is woven throughout all of these beautiful books that people love to read. I'm not the only one. People love to go back and reread those comforting classics like Anna Green Gables. The Lord would give me the themes like Anna Green Gables was just all about adoption in Christ, just how we are children of God and being adopted, and Matthew Cuthbert, just his fatherly love for her from the second he saw this scraggly little red-haired girl. He just loved her so much. And I knew that God was like, he would speak to my heart as I was writing and
Mhm.
then give me what to write for other people. But to take those themes of just his love for us throughout that book and then little women just living in community together and loving each other through the ups and downs of life. And I wrote that one during 2020, which was crazy. So it was a hard slog to write that book because it's all about living in community. And
Mhm.
I was cut off from community, but it taught me how to like keep reaching out as
Mhm.
I'm writing that. And then Secret Garden was about new life in Christ. It's that rebirth and redemption. And so
Mhm.
anyway, each of those books I felt like the Lord has just taken like the things I love most and kind of brought them together into this, like I said, it's like the intersection of these classic books and their themes and then the beauty of the gospel and just getting to weave those together.
Um, and then I just love the fact that you said that the Jane Austen book is that's going to be released as an audiobook. So I don't know if
Yeah.
we're really supposed to talk about that too much.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
we
okay, good.
can.
So
Yes,
that
I'm
is
so excited. I can talk all about it. I
okay,
I don't
good.
have like a firm release date. I'm waiting to hear, but I believe it'll be September, October, so of this year. So it's
Just in
coming
time
out.
for
It's
cozy reading time.
I
So
know! It'll be perfect for fall, and this year is, like, Jane Austen's 250th anniversary of her birth, so there's all these exciting celebrations going on, so I narrated the audiobook of Praying with Jane, 31 Days Through the Prayers of Jane Austen. That's my devotional book, so I narrated the devotional book, but Jane Austen's prayers were narrated by my dear friend that I've met through the Jane Austen world, Amanda Root. And for Jane Austen fans, that's a big deal because she played Anne Elliot in the Persuasion movie. So she's kind of our classic like Anne Elliot. And I'll have to send you that one. You gotta watch that next.
okay.
But anyway, so Amanda Root is a British actress and she was in Persuasion. She's been in many other things, but she agreed to read Jane Austen's prayers for the audiobook so that we can have them in her beautiful British accent, the lilting, gentle accent of that. Oh, it's so beautiful. So she'll have the prayers are read by her, and then the devotional will be read by me, and then it kind of alternates throughout. I cannot wait for that. It'll be out this fall, and it'll be a perfect little cozy read for audiobook or, if
Mhm.
people want to grab it off Amazon.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um,
Yeah.
and then for your books, like you would have gone to England and seen your books. They carry your books there. So how
Yes.
many people get the honor of doing that? And then that's exactly how you ended up working at that adorable little, it
Mhm.
looks like something out of a Hallmark movie.
Oh, it
The
is. It's
bookstore.
actually been the setting of a few Hallmark movies, the whole little town, and then
Oh,
our bookstore in Kingsbury actually based one of her books, The Bridge, or the bookstore where I work. Yeah, I think I just like I said, I grew up in a world of books and now I get to work at a bookstore part-time and I just adore it because I'm surrounded by new and old books and the wonderful smell of books every day when I get to go in.
so, but it was funny when you said you were too nervous but they had your books there, but a friend, and I think that that's really, really important too.
Yeah.
Mentioned like Helen was with you. And I think
Yeah.
that that's the other thing that writers do. We do need each other. We need each other
Oh,
to encourage each other and to
yeah.
inspire each other because I loved it that if you would have just said, she was like,
Yeah.
see our book.
Yes.
So,
That's the beauty of going to these writers conferences. I mean, I met you there. I've met so many friends who have actually become dear, dear friends. And, moving across the country away from friends and family was ridiculously difficult. But I remember the Lord would tell me and remind me, you have writer friends all around the country. They've always been long distance. They're just that relationship won't change. And so I have also a few different little writers groups and just, friends and but yeah, my friend Helen Arnold, she was here visiting and getting her daughter off to college, and I had just moved here. And so we were in the downtown area, just kind of exploring, going to lunch. I hadn't even ever really explored it that much. I hadn't been to the bookstore yet. I was in a fog, I'd been there like maybe a month or two. And we're walking into the bookstore, and I mean, the smell of it, it's just the bookstore smell. And I walk in, I was like, oh, I feel at home. It's like for the first time, I just felt at home. And I really did. I just looked to the side thinking, is there a help wanted sign? I can work here. And Helen was a few steps ahead and she sees they had my books in the front, like right on that front display table as you walk in, which I've never seen that before since it's pretty special. And Helen starts squealing. And I really don't think I would have said, oh, I wrote those, or I might have just timid. I'm not that person. I'm not really good at like promoting my own stuff. And so thankfully, yeah, she was there. This is the author. This is the author. And they had me sign books, and I got to know the bookstore manager, and they were all so excited. And they said, "Oh my gosh, your books sell like crazy! And don't you have a new one coming?" And Secret Garden was coming out, and so I've done book signings there, and then finally got up the courage, like a year later, say, "Do you think ever maybe I?" It was like the worst pitch of my life. I bumbled, I fumbled. I was like, I don't know how to say, "Can I work here someday?" They're like, "Oh my gosh, we would love to have you work here." I don't know why. I just had this like block. I mean, I've had so many jobs over the years, but maybe I just wanted it too bad, right?
well, and I think that's the thing too for writers is that it's okay to have a
Mhm.
secret desire, like something
Oh
deep
yeah,
inside of you. And the Lord
yeah,
sees that and he knows. And like you said, that smell, it just brought you home. It felt
it
like
did.
home. And I feel
Mhm.
like that isn't that just the writer's journey that really the Lord is doing something in the writer's life that
Mhm.
then flows out to other people because
Absolutely.
of him connecting those dots for you. So
Mhm. Yeah. Everything I've ever written, I really feel like it's something the Lord does in our heart first, is preparing something or we've gone through something and he ministers to us and then we put it into words. And that's cathartic for us as a writer, right? It's very therapeutic to have to work through some of that and slash a bunch that no one should ever read and then get to the point that will actually minister to the reader. I'm really big into that with writing. I feel like it shouldn't be about me. My
mhm.
story might be part of it, but then it should then focus to the reader and his or her walk with the Lord, and whatever God's ministered to my heart is now I'm going to share with the reader. And so it really is. It's this journey of us receiving, then we share, and then maybe they hopefully pass it on to the next person. But I feel like I always picture it. I really think in pictures, and I always feel like in my mind, in my heart, I might have 10 or 15 things that I think, oh, wouldn't that be so cool someday? And all these little secret hidden, thoughts and desires about like, well, what if I could write a book about this? Or what if I could do that? And you just have these little dreamy dreams. And then I feel like over time, God just has his timing and that he'll just kind of pluck them out when it's the right time. Like, we're gonna do that. And some maybe never. Maybe it's
Mhm.
just something for us or for something we just do at home for, our kids or whatever. But sometimes there are those little things that he will just pluck it out. And that's the amazing part about Christian writing. The journey we go through with the Lord is
Mhm.
far and above. I mean, that's the point of it all, I think. Yes, it's great to get to finally reach people and share whatever message God has put on your heart. I always feel like it's like burning and it needs to come out. And you're like, where and when does it come out? And will anyone read it? But he is doing a work in us. I mean, it's
Mhm.
such a refining process. That's nothing to like me wanting to just like if you just want to write because you want a lot of people to read it, I don't think that's Christian writing really. I mean, I've never thought like, oh, I just want to be a bestseller. I always feel like it's more that the Lord is putting some message. Maybe that's just for me as a devotional writer, but I get these messages and I feel so compelled to get them out of myself and share them when I feel like,
Mhm.
oh, the Lord's sharing this with me. I want to share it. And so I
Yeah.
teach and I write, I speak because whenever the Lord shares something good with me, I feel like I can't just bottle it up. It feels like it's gonna burst. It needs to come out.
I have to share this. I'm going to explode.
It's
Well,
like,
but
wow.
it does come back to that. I mean, I've had people say, "Oh, if I could write all of this and just have it impact one person, it will be
Yeah,
worth it." And I'm
yeah.
like, "Okay, but I just have to ask, like you might be the one person."
Right.
And
Oh,
really, if
yeah,
that needs to be okay
it
because
does.
sometimes those words never actually get
Mm-mm.
printed for publication. It's just something that the Lord prints on us. And
I would say my computer has probably hundreds of thousands of words that I'll never be published, but they were something I had to either write or process or get out of me before. Sometimes it's almost like it's like being constipated or something. Like something needs to come out
yeah.
before it finally starts to flow, right? It's like we got to get past this. And I think that's even just the emotional, mental, spiritual like healing process too at times that I need to just get some stuff out on paper because I'm clogged up emotionally and spiritually or I'm bitter about this thing or I'm still mad about that thing or sad or whatever's going on. It's like if I can process that out on paper and
Mhm.
then sometimes it was just between me and the Lord. Now I finally have settled that thing and
Mhm.
then now it's like you're clear to go, okay, but so what's the big picture? What is God actually trying to show me that then could be relatable to lots of people?
Mhm.
And I always say my drafts, I mean, I have some chapters of my books that just flow beautifully. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a butterfly. It just came out of its cocoon. It's like I wrote it in 40 minutes or something. And I'm like, I look at it again and again. I'm like, it really doesn't need much because I'm like major crafts work when I write, I will mold and shape for sometimes weeks, to get like if I get a first draft of a book done, I am not the type to just then turn it in. I it is as close to perfect
Mhm.
when I turn it in as possible. And it's only because I have something in me that feels like it's not quite there yet. And I just have to
Mhm.
keep molding and shaping. And so I always say it's like I feel like, I'm with like a chisel with a block of marble or something, and there's these chunks on the floor. And there's this one thing that's going to come out of it. But all that extra was useful. All of that was
Yeah.
my process with the Lord. And a lot of it's private. Like that's my sweet time with Jesus where I was like, please, please show me what this one's about. I've tried it 6 ways. But it's because all those 6 other ways were something he wanted to do in me. And then
Mhm.
finally number 7 is now that's the one that goes out. That's for the reader. And it for me it feels like it settles. I'm just like, "Oh, that's it. That's the one." All
Yeah.
that other stuff wasn't a waste though.
Mm-mm.
It's like I think someday maybe in heaven, all as writers, we'll see like all the things we wrote with the Lord. I always feel like I'm spending time with the Holy Spirit when I'm writing. It's like all the stuff we wrote together, and some of it went to other people, but there were probably volumes that we wrote together, and maybe those are on the shelves in heaven. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah,
Oh.
Jesus and I wrote that one. Nobody else got to read it, but that's our book. And I just
Mm.
think it's so special, and that's the encouraging part when you aren't seeing stuff get maybe published yet or whatever, is that All of that. It's so sweet with the Lord, and some of it you will use later. You'll come back and pick it back up, but some of it is just the process, and you get to spend that time with him. It's like, well, I spent the morning with Jesus. I didn't really get that chapter written, but man, I learned a lot, and he was
Mhm.
speaking to me about a lot of stuff, and that's the sweet part, and it's obviously awesome when it finally does click too, because if you're banging your head against the wall, it's always good when you finally get the chapter written.
You're like, "Okay." And the editor is like, I'm glad you spent time with Jesus, but it's time to
Yeah.
spend time with the pub board." I think it's just as important now as it ever has been. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's an ongoing, that's never gonna end. Okay, well, we're gonna have to wrap this up here,
Okay.
but I just
Mhm.
wanna thank you so much for
Thank you for
joining. And just I think it's really important for people, like you said, just to persevere and just trust
yeah.
the process that the Lord is taking you through.